Hi everybody, hope everyone is doing okay. We're on about week 2 or 3 of quarantine and Easter's coming, so I thought it would be fun to do an Easter bunny. This will be a mixed medium bunny that you can embellish with a bow tie or flower if you would like a more feminine bunny, and I will show you that along the way. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at our reference photo, and by the way, I'll show you the supplies you're gonna need. Really, any kind of white construction paper will do. If you have watercolor paper, that is even better, but you can make white paper work, construction paper. And then for the bunny, and again, use the materials you have. You can be creative, but what I'm gonna use here are just some crayons or pastels, some watercolors, and then later when I go to embellish with a bow tie or a flower, I'm gonna need some scissors to cut that out. All right, so I'm going to show you the reference photo here. We're looking at this cute bunny. And if you notice, when we're looking at his face, do you guys notice how I might start with an oval originally, but then it's gonna kind of go out on the bottom a little bit because he's got these cute puffy cheeks. And then at the bottom for his body, we just see a little bit of his shoulders, which go off to the side almost like as if this was gonna be a triangle. And then doing these long elongated shapes up here for his ears. So, I'm gonna go ahead and sketch out starting with this sort of oblong shape here with his cheeks off to the side. And then for his body, I'm just gonna have 2 little lines coming off to the side. The ears are really big and they're gonna go up to the very top of the page here. And when I'm sketching, I like to just make several light whisper lines, and I can go back and choose the lines I want later. Okay? And then what I want you to notice is look at his eyes. Do you see how his eyes are kind of spread apart there on the side? So I'm gonna just draw these half circles above his cheek, and this is where his eyes are gonna be. Okay? Down here, he's gonna have this little area with his fluffy cheeks, and then for his nose and mouth, it's almost like a wide Y with a line coming down and just a line off to the side. Okay? All right, so now we've got our sketch. Okay, for this next part, what we're gonna do is outline our bunny, and this is my favorite part. You've got several options. We're gonna use watercolors later, and if you wanna go ahead and use the watercolor now, you would use the black. And what I like to do is you should have some water close by. I should mention, so our water heater broke this morning and my husband is fixing it, and right now he's instructed us not to use any water. So I'm just gonna pretend like I have water. And I would wake up the color by putting a little bit of water on that palette, and then really swish it around so that I get lots and lots of watercolor on my brush. Okay? The other thing you could do is you could just use a black crayon to go over the whole entire, all the pencil lines. Or if you do have an ink, this is a Sumi ink, which I love using, and this is what I'm gonna use, especially since we don't have water this morning. And now any brush will do. I've got this nice watercolor brush which has sort of this tip that I love. And I am going to just go in and very quickly do these sort of gesture lines going over all of those pencil lines. Now notice how sketchy and kind of irregular they are. And I think that makes your bunny look super interesting, so that's good. And what I mean by that, I've got some different thicknesses of the line. And I get those basically by how hard I'm pressing down. If I just barely touch my brush to the paper, I get this nice thin line. And if I press down harder, I can get a thicker line. And what I like is those irregular edges because I think it makes it look super interesting. And I'm gonna look and I notice that the bunny has a little bit darker area right underneath his chin. He's got some darkness over here and this little fold of his ear. All right, now for the eye, I want to be a little bit more careful, and I'm going to go in and make these little eyes out of pure black, but what I'm doing is leaving a tiny bit of them where the white paper shows through, and then what that does is it makes it look like there's a little sparkle in his eye. Then I'm going to take the tip and I'm going to try to get that cute little eyelash coming off the top of his eye. And then there's also almost like a little L here underneath the eye and then a backwards L on this side. And then finally, I'm going to do the Y. It's a really wide Y. Just with a little kind of dash for his mouth. All right, and now I think I've got most of what I'm looking for. Now, what I always think is fun to do too, but you got to be careful with this. But if you're using watercolors, you can even go in, and I just have a little bit of watercolor on my brush, or in this case, the Sumi ink, and I'm just going to sort of tap it close to my close to my paper. You see how I did that? And then I can go back and exaggerate a few of those dots because I always like little splashes and dots to give it some movement. Okay? Okay, now that we have our bunny outlined in black, we're going to work on doing the background first. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some texture and interest in the background. You can use either crayons for this, or I like to use pastels if you have pastels. If you don't, you can get them on Amazon for like $3 a box. And what's nice about pastels is they've got a lot of pigment, and when you use them with watercolor, they really resist the watercolor and just make some interesting patterns. So what I'm going to do is use a white, and I want to show you with this pastel. You can see it's been used a lot. It's small, and that's okay. You still can get a lot of good strokes from this tiny little piece. But I'm going to go back, and now notice on my first one, I just made like a little U shape, a pattern repeating. This time, I'm just going to draw little dashes going across. And I have to concentrate because you'll see that when I work in white, I can't see it very well. So I have to really look carefully and just sort of go down my page, repeating some of these little dashes. Okay, and then what's going to happen is as soon as I go over these with color, the watercolor is going to resist the wax in the pastel, and you'll be able to see these little white dashes. Okay? All right, so next, what you're going to do is you're going to, again, take those watercolors and you can wake them up. Let me move my reference photo here. Now, I'll remind you that I'm in an interesting situation with no water right now since our water heater is broken. I have a tiny bit of water in here, but what I would do is just wake up the colors I need by putting a little dot on the color and swirling it around, okay? In this case, since I don't have water, I'm lucky in that I do have liquid watercolor, so that's what I'm gonna use. But it's the same as if you have a set of watercolors at home. All right, so what I'm gonna do is make sure I've got plenty of paint on my brush, and I'm just gonna come in and do the background. And you'll see how fun that is as it resists those white strokes. Okay, and I'm just gonna take my time and go around the whole entire bunny. And what I like to do, I always like to leave a little bit of a border on the side. So I'm gonna leave a little white space here. And I think it's kind of interesting when it's sort of this irregular border. I'm gonna take my time and go around all of the back space here to get this bright color. You can choose really any color you want. You can see I chose turquoise before. Now I'm going in with green, which I think is especially fun this time of year in the spring. Okay. See how those white slashes just sort of pop? You can color all the background. There we go. Voila. Okay, let me look and make sure that I got most of the areas good. Okay. So next what I'm going to do, and at this stage you may want to just go ahead and let that dry before you come in with the brown. I'm just going to be careful and I'm going to show you how I'm going to go in, but again, if you're worried about those colors mixing, you might want to wait a minute until that green dries. All right, so I'm getting my water from a spray bottle since I don't have much. I poured a little bit in here. And I'm going to go in with a brown now. So I'm going to wake that color up, swirl it around so I get lots and lots of color on my brush. And then I'm just going to come in with that brown and block in the area. And you'll notice you can get different shades of brown or whatever color you're using based on the amount of water that you use. So what I like to do is I'll go in with this sort of lighter wash, and then I can go back over it with even more color to give it just some dimension of some darker areas. Also, you'll notice that I'm being kind of quick and loose with my strokes, and that's good because I like that in watercolor when you've got sort of these nice loose strokes that show some movement and interest. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I just went back with a little more brown over some areas to give it just a little bit darker dimension. And then I can't forget about his ears. I've got the top folds of his ears are going to be brown on both sides. Okay, and just maybe a little bit along the edge there. And then in a minute, we're going to go back and add some pink. Okay, so for his little cheeks, you've got two options. If you have, like this is a pretty great set of watercolors. I've got lots of choices of colors. If you're using just the Praying or watercolor or Crayola watercolor set, you may not have several shades of brown, and that's okay. You can get a lighter shade just by adding more water. So I have a little bit of brown on my brush. I'm going to dip it back in the water, and I'm just going to do a quick wash over his cheeks here. And you'll notice how it's a little bit lighter. Okay. All right, and then finally what I'm going to do is I'm washing my brush as best as I can with a little bit of water I have, and I'm going to go in with a pink. If you don't have a pink, a really watered down red will work great. And I'm just going to go in with a quick pink wash, and I love that pink against the green. And I'm just going to do some quick loose strokes here, blocking in that color. And I like the irregular shades where I've got some places where it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to add a little bit of darker color toward the bottom because he'll have more of the shadow of the fold there. Okay? Ooh, all right. Doing good, guys. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna embellish our bunny. And you guys can use your creativity and embellish him however you want. If you wanna make a little hat for him. In this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to make a bow tie, and then also show you how to make a little flower on top. And what I have is just a couple little scraps of paper. And I can use either crayons or pastels again. And I'm going to do the same thing with the watercolor resist. Where the first thing I'm going to do is go in, and I'll just use a yellow crayon this time. And I'm going to make a flower. So I'm doing a circle. Actually, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. All right, I'll do the circle for the middle, and then just making some little petals all the way around. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and press down so that I get lots of wax and lots of pigment. And I'm going to color those in. You can make your flower whatever color you want. I'm going to give mine a nice pink center. Okay, and then I can go back and I can add some watercolor over that just to sort of fill in some of those white spaces and give it some dimension. So here I'm adding a little bit of pink in the middle, and then I'll go back over with some yellow. Okay. All right, I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to show you how you can make a bow tie. And you actually, this could be a bow also for the bunny's ear. I'm going to first start with just sort of a oval like this. Next, I'm going to do kind of like a rounded triangle on either side, like this. And then I'm going to take my time and I'm going to make some stripes. Okay. Now, if you notice with the first one I showed you, what I had sitting around, I had some scrapbook paper. And if you guys have any kind of scrapbook paper laying around, you may have some fun patterns or colors. That's always a great way to embellish these as well. Then what I like to do is I may draw my bow, and I've just got a little bit of room over here, on the back side, and then I can cut it out. Another thing you can do is if you have any magazines laying around or newspaper, you can flip through and see if there are any colorful pages, and that makes really good collage paper as well. So use your imagination. You can do polka dots, you can do stripes, you can even take newspaper or collage paper and add your own patterns on top of them. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back now and just add a nice thick line. Since that's kind of staying consistent with him being outlined in black. And I can add a little bow tie. Okay. All right, now I'm ready for going over the flower in black. Okay, it's a little wet, so I'm going to be careful, but I'll go ahead and keep things moving and do my best. When I'm cutting, I'm going to leave a little bubble white area around that black line to make sure that I really have emphasized that black line. It'll make the flower pop more too. I'm just going to take my time and go around. What's fun too, you could even have your embellishments with tape where you can change them out throughout the week and maybe make a little hat or bows for the ears, flowers, whatever you want to do, and just change them. Okay, so let's give this bunny a little flower in the ear, and voila. Well, I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys did too. Keep creating, and I would love to see what you come up with. Please email me your finished works. Take care, guys.